One of the things that we think employers should keep in mind and be cognizant of is make sure you are properly reimbursing your employees for all necessary expenses that they have incurred in the scope of their employment. Claims for reimbursement are pretty common, and lawsuits by employees for such claims allow for not only recovery for attorney's fees, but also the claimed reimbursement. So consistent with that, employers must reimburse employees for all necessary expenses and losses incurred in the course and scope of their employment. The law is interpreted very broadly by the courts. This is consistent with the public policy that favors protecting employees from employers passing business-related expenses to the employees, and always err on the side of making sure that reimbursement is required. And you cannot have your employees waive their right to claim for reimbursement. Next slide. What are some of the necessary work-related expenses? These may include use of employees' personal vehicle for business purposes. So that would be generally mileage reimbursement. Things such as business travel expenses, meals and lodging, tools and equipment that employees are required to perform the job, use of employees' personal cell phone for business purposes, required uniform purchase and maintenance of the uniform, and this also could include shoes and jackets. Employees who work from home may request reimbursement for expenses incurred, such as office supplies, internet access, and other equipment. Another issue that I think employers oftentimes overlook are a reimbursement for self-use and group tax checks. An employer must reimburse an employee if the employee is required to use a personal cell phone to make work-related calls. This can include calls, sending messages, voicemails, texts, messaging apps, which are usually used by employers and employee group messaging. So reimbursement cell phone is required even if an employee may have an unlimited data plan. And even if the employee does not incur any extra charge above and beyond what is already included in their data plan, that does not give an employer a defense. So an employer must always reimburse the employee for any cell phone reimbursement charges reimbursement expense that they submit. Employees, in order to show that they are entitled to reimbursement for cell phone, they just have to make a claim and be able to show that they did in fact use their cell phone data plan for business expenses, for work-related reasons. Now, what is a reasonable percentage of reimbursement for cell phones? Oftentimes, reimbursement amounts are pretty straightforward, meaning it's exactly the amount that's incurred by the employee because they can show a receipt for example, an item that they may have purchased. But when it comes to use of personal cell phone, for example, what is a reasonable amount? Is it 20%, 75%? Unfortunately, courts have yet to explain what a reasonable amount is and how to calculate it. There are some guidance, however. Employers can consider not only the actual expense that the employee incurred, but also whether each of those expenses was necessary, which in turn depends on the reasonableness of the employee's choice. However, if the employee is getting calls, messages, voicemails, emails, or messages through a group texting or messaging app, it's not based on the employee's choice. So the necessary standard does not necessarily apply in that case. While employers are allowed to have some discretion in the amount of reimbursement for cell phone use, the standard is still reasonableness of the amount, which means that the employer should be careful in this area, and it should be an amount that the employer can defend if challenged based on objective factors as a reasonable amount. Some recommendations for what a reasonable percentage would be. You can come up with a flat monthly stipend ranging from $10 to $100 or more based on estimated percentage, like 10 to 50%. The reimbursement number is a business decision based on history of usage by the employees. Employers can also set different reimbursement amounts for different categories of employees or different job titles, as long as it can be justified based on the position and or the amount of usage. For example, one employee whose job depends on the phone may be reimbursed 100%, whereas an in-office staff, on the other hand, with less frequent use could get a stipend of a lesser amount or a lower percentage than the others. How can employers protect against expense reimbursement claims? Establish a clearly explained expense reimbursement policy to distribute to and communicate it to the employees. Remember to inform your new hires when they're hired about the expense reimbursement policy. Your expense reimbursement policy can be in the handbook. It's not necessary to have a separate standalone policy. Within the policy, provide a point of contact should employees have any questions or concerns or report any reimbursements that they did not receive or any under reimbursements. Specify a time frame, a deadline by which employees must submit claims for reimbursement. For example, within 30 days of incurring the expenses. Indicate any supporting documents that are needed, such as receipts or explanation of mileage claims. If pre-approval is required, state that in the policy. Pay reimbursement within a specific time frame. Let employees know when they will see the payment from the company. If there is a uniform policy, review any language that is in the uniform purchase policy. And if there is a deposit required, make sure that the employer is in compliance with the California law regarding how the deposit is supposed to be maintained. There is special requirements for any deposits that an employer requires for uniforms, etc. For cell phone reimbursement, you want to state in the policy that the employer will reimburse either a flat monthly stipend or if it's a prorated amount. Employees may submit expense requests each month to the extent that the flat rate doesn't cover the total expense for the usage for that month. If an employee does not complain or say anything, any communication by the employer to the employees, even if employees don't communicate or say anything about their entitlement to cell phone reimbursement, any communication by the employer to the employee's cell phone where employer initiates it is work-related. So the employer should always err on the side of reimbursing the employee for those communications made to the employee's cell phone.